he just left because he hooked up with wrestling. Now this was Michael coming out of a bathtub. I had to rush him to a hospital 3 times. They had a 20,000 mortality at the poultry farm across the street. Did not tell anybody, but the neighbors knew it. If you can imagine what 20,000 birds smell like in the middle of summer, 4 months, we had flies. Literally, we had somebody on a fly swatter for months. And they're filthy. They carry this antibiotic resistance. They're filthy. Matter of fact, I was gone for a couple days. Last week, I came back, now we're into fall. I had to clean all my windowsills of dead flies off. In this temperature. Really? Okay, this is some things that we got in aerials that are not by me, but I just wanted to show you the widespread of, how it is not, regulations are not being followed. You can see the black area up there, that's spreading on top of snow. They're not supposed to do that. When it melts, it's going to go where? Right into the water. Okay, this is interesting. Look at the size of the tanker truck. This is a community on the Susquehanna River in Jersey Shore. They are bringing, it's a 2.5 million gallon concrete container that they built with not even a construction permit at the township level. The slaughterhouse paid for it to be put on a farm in the next county over and truck all this blood. This is blood from a slaughterhouse. You can see, look at the size of the tanker. Look at the wetlands. Can you see the wetlands there? Does that look like it's within 150 feet? Didn't even have a permit. Now, this plant is something called approved for immediate slaughter, and they're using the blood as nitrogen, as a nutrient for the fields there, and because it has a low nitrogen content, they have to use a lot of it. So 12 million gallons are being put on the banks of the Susquehanna River, and they have drain tiles that go directly into the river. Now, again, this is a plant that's approved for immediate slaughter, which means these animals can be diseased or sick. That's what they're spraying next to them on their houses. This, I got the pooling. See all the pooling here? When we took it up in the air to show that it's not being applied correctly. They're not allowed to leave pools like that in there. It's being just too much put on it, and that's what happens with the running. This is more pictures, same thing. This is more, again, of the truck, and you can see on the right side, where you see that sand, you can see it's leaking out the bottom. It's hard to see, but on the right side, so the tank's leaking. It's leaching right into the ground. This is their stream, filled with blood. They called me. I said, call the department, tell them come out with the water, get a water test. And I told her, call the lab, because guess who's not going to take a water test? The department. They were out there for 2 days, and they decided that this was the same color from doing a visual site inspection, the same color of a wetland, so it moved from there. I said, tell me, there has not been rain in 7 days, so how did that move from a half mile away to here? And he didn't have an answer. I have the lab results. Coliform's supposed to be 1, it's 1,200. See the Christmas wreath? That came from the same community. They're spraying the blood on top of the snow. I got an email. Merry Christmas from Nippenose Township. This is a community in York County. You see the pool around the manure piles. This was taken from a facility, and again, they say that they're managing these nutrients. We have these nutrient management plans. Well, this was taken out in dump trucks with masking tape over the lettering on the dump trucks to the next county over, put here, and it sat there for over a month. And that's all water that you see that's around there. Sent pictures, called the agency, no violation. You can see all the bones from the chickens in there. The chickens were removed 3 to 4 months early. These were layers, which meant could have been diseased. Good artwork, great for community organizing. This is part of Jay's community. They're fighting a slaughterhouse that they want to put on the Indian River, 12 million gallons, I'm sorry, 2 million birds per year and discharge on the Indian River, which is not even supposed to be done. They want to put it came out to be 414 factory farms within slightly over a 50-mile radius to supply the birds for that house. Every community, what are our chances of winning? Well, you see the foot on there. Good news, we've held them back for 18 months. They have not even gotten their local permits. We're fighting local level. We have some help from one of the universities, which is pro bono, fighting remediation appeals. So we've done very well. This was the governor's pet project, and they didn't even get the local zoning yet. They're not real happy with us, but you know, it shouldn't be. So we had 3 victories alone just since July in PA, and all different scenarios. This one they were fighting for 18 months, and it was, you know, engineers and a lot of local zoning and going to the agencies. They left, the applicant withdrew. The one that was in Berks County. Adams County was a layer operation that they were applying for. Within a month, we got the community organized, did meetings, rallied. At the first zoning hearing, the applicant didn't show up, withdrew his application. So within a month, all different scenarios. You need to know where you press. You know, where are the weak spots? That's where you go. That's where experience gets you. The last one, love thy neighbor. Great story. I'll try to go real quick on this. One of the gentlemen who is a very sustainable farmer and does conferences with me, I got a call from a community. It was his nephew that wanted to put a factory farm in the community. I said, oh my God, you know, his uncle's a friend of mine, and this community wants to, I called him in with his uncle and the nephew, and I sat down, and I went through some of the stories, like the farmer I was talking about, Craig Watts, what really goes on in the contract, showed him documents that I had, you know, how they built things illegally. This is who you're gonna be signing with. Is this who you wanna partner with? And I said, look, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm doing a community meeting Wednesday, come out, talk to the community, this is your chance to hear their concerns. And it was an Amish man, and he called me up 2 weeks later, he said, I wanna have a meeting with the community. He withdrew, he said, the commandments and part of the things that we're told to do is love thy neighbor, and I don't think maybe buying the family farm is the most important thing in the world. Now we're trying to help him get a sustainable operation so he can buy the family farm. I get goosebumps when I talk about that because you don't see that attitude much. And that's Kathy Phillips. So anyway, we're plugging on, and we hope that communities keep pushing away, keep plugging, because I tell every community, we can give you all the resources in the world, you know, the engineer, but if you don't stand up and fight, you don't have any chance. But you can see, this is just since July, 3 wins. That's huge, huge. So thank you for letting me share a little bit of.
Hi, everybody. Whew, that's a tough one to follow. But let's see where we go from here. I'm your Assateague Coastkeeper. I am a member of Waterkeeper Alliance, and throughout the United States and internationally, we have clean water advocates who speak out for their waterways, and that is who a waterkeeper is. I'm a member of Waterkeepers Chesapeake. We are 18 programs within the Chesapeake and Coastal Bays. Hi, Dottie. Within the Chesapeake and Coastal Bays watersheds. And as I said, we are the voices for our waterway. And let's see if I can make this technology work. Maybe not. I need some help. I see. Okay, cool. And this is a little PSA that I'm going to run real quick that I think says it all about who waterkeepers are. Let's see if I can get this to run.
Waterkeepers, we're visionaries and activists creating practical, achievable ways to save our planet's sources of clean water. We're ordinary people fathers, mothers, sisters, and brothers, against those who would pollute and destroy our precious, irreplaceable water resources. We are men and women drawn from different regions, races, and classes, bound together by an extraordinary passion and motivated by our shared and unshakable belief that clean water isn't the privilege of the few, but the basic human right of all. We know that apart, we are isolated and easy to ignore, but together, as water keepers, united in a common purpose, equipped with our combined resources of will, imagination, and determination, we are unstoppable.
Okay, and I'm back. As a water keeper, obviously, I am concerned about my community and how pollution to our waterways can impact those who live in our communities. As you can see by this slide, pretty well explains how dirty water can impact us. Certainly for those of us who live on the Eastern Shore and the lower Eastern Shore, most of our water comes from well water. And so while our rivers and our bays don't necessarily provide our drinking water, it's what happens on the land does impact what happens to our drinking water. But it also impacts, healthy economies as a result of tourism, as a result of recreation, and certainly housing development, commercial development in within, close to waterways. People want to live close to the water. They like living close to the water, except that it's not very nice living close to the water when your waterways are covered with algae to the extent that you can't even get your boat up and down your canal without clogging up your motor. And where does all this algae come from? It comes from nutrients. Where I live on the lower Eastern Shore, it's very rural, very agriculture. The main economy down on the lower shore, aside from Ocean City, Maryland, which is a resort tourism economy, everything else is either forestry or agriculture. And as was explained earlier, Keith did a great job of showing, the amount of waste that is generated from the poultry industry on the lower Eastern Shore. And this is, I think, a great example of what is considered waste management on the Eastern Shore. This is a pile of chicken manure. Actually, that goes beyond being a pile. I call it my mountain of manure. This was actually up on this was up near Route 404 and Route 50 intersection about 4 years ago. I shot that. It just amazed me. I mean, I'm kind of known as the poop lady down on the lower Eastern Shore because I go around and I document where these piles of manure are, how close they are to creeks, to ditches, to waterways, how long they've been stored out in the fields like this where they're exposed to weather elements and rain. I think Maria had she had a better photo than I have of the leachate that accumulates underneath these piles. An interesting story about that is sometimes, well, this is from our landfill down in Worcester County, but the same thing happens, a lot of leachate, which is, of course, a lot of nasty chemicals and toxins that are in that. When the ponds build up around the Worcester County landfill, they actually pump that out with sewage trucks. They take it to Snow Hill, they open up a manhole cover, and they pump it down into the wastewater system, so it goes through the Snow Hill or Pocomoke wastewater treatment plants. And obviously, wastewater treatment plants don't handle the types of toxins that are in their waste management. I had this slide, which I love, to show you the amount of poultry manure that is generated in Maryland each year. If you can just imagine stacking M&T Stadium, on top of itself like this, and then filling it with chicken manure that exceeds my mountain. But this is what we are up against. Maria was kind of touching on it, as was Keith. that agriculture has this aura about it, and it is not regulated like other waste-producing industries, and it becomes a problem. The scale of the poultry industry on the Lower Eastern Shore right now, well, actually on all of Delmarva, has greatly changed from what it was in the 1940s and the 1950s, even the 1960s. And we are no longer seeing small family farms with 2 or 3 chicken houses. We're seeing these massive industrial complexes being built. This is an example of one, and in fact, this picture doesn't even show you the entire complex. There are 8 more houses off in this direction. Up at the upper right-hand corner at that side, there are, see, there's 6 there, so there's 12 more houses that go down the road there. This is all, this is owned by a different person, a different farmer, but everything else you see there is owned by one person. He doesn't live there. It's not his family farm. He doesn't live anywhere near there. And it's just managed by someone who lives in a trailer. Basically the same thing here too. And these are 660-foot long poultry houses. They can hold up to 30 to 40,000 chickens inside a house. You're going to have approximately 7 flocks cycle through. This one farm, well, I'm not even going to call it a farm, this one factory produces millions and millions of chickens a year, and produces all of the waste that comes from those chickens. And this is just one CAFO on the Lower Eastern Shore, just outside of Princess Anne. Do you see that little row of houses up there? There's 6 houses. So this is an interesting story of what can happen and how right-to-farm laws currently protect these factory facilities. All of this, there used to be about 6 smaller poultry houses down here on this particular poultry growing operation. Everything else was farm fields with corn, soybeans, horses, a little bit of cattle, the white picturesque farmhouse, the red barn. The owner of the properties over here to the right of those parcels, he used his right to sell off a certain number of lots for development. These people came in and built their small little rancher-style houses. They had beautiful views of farmland out behind their houses. What the realtor failed to tell them, which we now know the realtor knew quite well, was that all of that property had been sold to Mount Air and was going to be developed into poultry houses. So within 2 years of building their homes and being locked into mortgages for their homes, this is what they ended up being surrounded by. They can't sell their properties now. Who wants to buy them? I wish I had a close-up photo to show you of what these houses are like, but they're totally enclosed. The birds don't get fresh air. They're called tunnel houses because they suck the air in from one end and then push it out the other end. Because it's enclosed, because there are so many birds inside of there, and because all the manure stays in there throughout the entire flock, there's a lot of ammonia buildup. If it were left inside the houses, it would kill the birds. So that's not good for the birds. So where does it go? It goes out into the air where we get to breathe it. Another great example of waste management. So these houses are subjected to, the homes are subjected to the ammonia emissions, the feathers, the dust, the waste, the manure that gets sucked through those houses and pushed out into the air. And the people who live there, they can't hang their laundry up outside. One of those houses, they had attempted to have an above-ground pool to recreate in. Impossible, because it would end up with feathers and litter floating on top of it. And one gentleman who lived in that third house from the right, he was having very bad health issues, skin rashes, problems breathing. He and his wife tried to sell their house so that they could move. He had to get away from there. And they couldn't sell their house, and they eventually just walked away from it. And he let the mortgage foreclose. So, you can't continue to allow right to farm laws to protect what has become industry. And this is one of the things that we are trying to work on in Somerset County. But we're going about it a little bit differently. We're working with the local community in Somerset County to approach planning and zoning boards and talk about the health issues, the air emissions, and the problems of having communities so close to these factory-style facilities. And we are making some headway in Somerset County, which I'm really excited about. And the Planning Commission is going to take a look at their zoning laws. So we're going about it a little bit differently. We're not trying to go after it from the pollution side of things, that, the nearby waterways are being impacted by this. Instead, we're trying to make some forward steps by trying to change local zoning codes. We'll see what happens in Somerset County. It's the first time it's ever been tried in the state of Maryland, and might even be the first time in Maryland. And so we're real excited about this. I know Keith had this map up there earlier, but I love this. I had this on my Facebook page for a while. I said this is the U.S. This is the U.S. on chicken. And you can just see what Delmarva looks like. It's not even blue dots anymore. It's just a black mass. The question is, how many more chickens can this little small peninsula hold? There's some geese going on over there. Just another quick slide, to emphasize the density of poultry production on Maryland's Eastern Shore and over in the Shenandoah watershed also. Shenandoah watershed is more turkeys, egg-laying operations. And I think we have geese flying through. Are they in the room? But from the waterkeeper's point of view, I have to talk a little bit about our waterways and how industrial agriculture on the Eastern Shore is impacting my waterways. We have a problem with phosphorus. Chicken manure is very high in nitrogen and phosphorus. A lot of corn and soybeans are grown on the Eastern Shore to feed the poultry industry, to feed the chickens. The nitrogen does get used by the corn and soybeans being grown. The phosphorus doesn't get used. Our fields on the lower Eastern Shore are so heavily saturated with phosphorus right now that any more chicken manure that goes on those fields, all of the phosphorus in that manure is going to be excess. It's either going to run down into our groundwater or it's going to run off into our streams. And that's another thing, streams. Everybody knows what a stream is. Well, I'm from the lower Eastern Shore. We don't have streams. We have ditches. We have agricultural ditches. The Clean Water Act defines certain types of discharges, point sources and non-point sources. Point sources are regulated. Those are end of pipe. Those are pipes that come out of wastewater treatment plants, that come out of car washes, that, those are permitted and regulated, as my earlier slide showed you. Ditches are not considered point sources. They're considered non-point sources, but in reality, they are our pipes. This is up in the headwaters of the St. Martin River. You will see over there, there's like a little, I don't know if it's showing up blue to you, but it says Birch Branch. Birch Branch is probably at one time was a branch or a stream, but it has been channelized. It's just a big straight ditch. And it drains down to the bottom right-hand corner into Shingle Landing Prong, which then that Shingle Landing Prong comes off of the upper part of the St. Martin River. St. Martin River goes down into our coastal bays. So lots of times, you know, people will talk about impacts down in the coastal bays, like the Ocean Pines wastewater treatment plant, which discharges to the coastal bays. And stormwater that discharges straight out to the coastal bays. But you've got to go way upstream of the coastal bays. Those are great photo ops, but that is a pollution contributor, but it is minuscule compared to where our major nutrient pollution is coming from. And you can see the straight lines through all those fields. Those are all little ditches, swales that carry stormwater runoff from the fields. It's also meant to drain the land. We have a very high water table, obviously, that close to the ocean. And so in order to grow crops, you have to drain that water table down somewhat. So we just have this constant system of water being drained from thousands of acres. And for the most part, everything, all these ag fields that you see with their straight ditches, they eventually all connect to Birch Branch, and it all comes down into the coastal bays. I'm probably not going to see it, certainly not during my tenure as a coastkeeper, maybe not even in my lifetime, but someday I hope that these ditches are considered a point source and that they are regulated, and that we do a better job of handling, a better job of waste management and handling the waste from our poultry industry on the Eastern Shore, so that it isn't just dumped on our land to run off into our waterways. I love this photo. This is someone who's land applying poultry manure to their field. The only problem is it was a really windy day, and the public can't see nutrient management plans for that farm. They're not publicly accessible, they're secret. I would love to see the nutrient management plan for that particular farm, because I would like to see how MDA can justify that the proper amount of nutrients are being applied to that field when the majority of what he is spraying out the back of this, what I consider an antique piece of technology, which is just manure spreader throwing dry litter out into the air. Some of it's going to land on that field, but most of it was just blowing across the roadway to the point where traffic had to stop. It was summertime, it was early spring, or late spring, but it was a warm day. Had to roll up your windows, turn your truck ventilation to closed, and then make a run for it through there while all this stuff is hitting the side of your truck and your car. That's all hitting the roadway, the ditches on the side of the roadway. When it rained 2 days later, none of those nutrients were doing any benefit to that farm field at all. It was all running down the ditch, which eventually connected to Nassawango Creek and out into the Pocomoke River. So this is what we deal with on the Eastern Shore. I agree with Maria. Contract farmers, they're the ones who are left with the responsibility of what to do with this waste. They do see it as a benefit to them because it helps them to grow these crops. But the reality is that the waste management program for the lower Eastern Shore and for the poultry industry is broken, and we need to do something about it. And this is where I'm going to segue over to Michelle. And I don't have a pretty picture of Michelle. What I have is a waste energy plant to show you what we might be faced with pretty soon down on the lower shore. So some people, politicians, the farm industry, everybody who's trying to figure out what to do with all of this chicken manure as we keep growing more and more and more chickens on Delmarva, well, let's burn it. That way we don't have to put it on the land, it won't run off into the water anymore, but all you're doing is transferring that source of pollution to the air. And I'm going to turn it over to Michelle at this point, but this is not a win-win situation to take your waste and burn it and transfer your pollutants up into the air. If anything, that's going to impact communities even harder than what is happening with land application. The fix is fewer chickens, and someday, hopefully, we will have a more diversified form of agriculture back on the Eastern Shore again, and we will have healthier waterways. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. And I'm sorry, I do want everybody to read this real quick, though. I'm very inspired by Rabbi Cardin, and she spoke at the Environmental Summit in Annapolis 2 years ago. And she said this in her speech, and I wrote it down word for word. I checked it with her after the conference, and I use this all the time. And she is so absolutely right. And I had to put this in here because too often the industry likes to say it's an us against them kind of thing, and it's not. We're all in this together, and we're all impacted by it together. Thank you.
Thank you. We're a little behind schedule, and a lot of what I was going to cover actually has been covered already, so I'll try to keep it short because I really want to have time for a dialogue and for questions. But as many of the previous speakers have said, we have too much manure, too little land to spread it on. That's a nationwide problem here in the Chesapeake Bay and in Maryland specifically. How many people are from Maryland? Is this most of the room? Almost all of the room? Virginia, very close by? Well, Maryland, we have, 296 broiler chickens producing over 550,000 tons of manure per year. We know that just from the 4 densest counties, we have an excess of 300,000 tons of waste being produced, and we know that number's low because, as Kathy mentioned, we have recent phosphorus tools that tell us that we've actually been overapplying even more than we thought we had been. And so really the solution is to diversify our agriculture system and reduce the number of chickens. But instead of doing that, the state's been in denial, and we're trying to deal with the symptom of too much waste instead of the problem of too many chickens, and that's getting complicated. One of the latest solutions, which we think is a false solution that's on the table, is under the rubric of manure to energy. And there's companies are incentivized to come up with manure to energy projects because a lot of the state's renewable portfolio standards have been bastardized by the industry, and so now manure is on par with solar and wind as a renewable energy source. And combustion technologies like poultry litter incineration is now on par with solar and wind. From my perspective, burning anything shouldn't be considered renewable energy. Certainly not in 2014, soon to be 2015, right? But that's a problem because with those incentives come a lot of taxpayer dollars. And without those taxpayer dollars, a lot of these solutions are not affordable. So Maryland's been targeted for the second ever manure incinerator. The only plant that exists, and Keith referenced this earlier, is in Benson, Minnesota. This is, it looks sort of clean, but it's the only picture I could find. But it burns 500,000 tons per year of turkey litter, and it combusts along with that turkey litter hundreds of thousands of woody biomass and animal byproducts. And we looked at this facility to try to see if it was a cautionary tale for us, and sure enough, we pulled the emissions inventories. And in addition now to all the CAFOs that are come in behind to support this plant, you're now going to have air emissions of very toxic chemicals coming to the communities as well. And the emissions inventory from this plant showed high levels of toxic chemicals well above what Maryland's current coal-fired power plants